Okay, why don't we get started? Hi, everybody. Welcome to this webinar on the top 5 useful features of Tableau. I'm Jim Cody. I'm going to be a presenter for this webinar. All right. So, as we were putting this together, I was thinking maybe we should have called it 5 useful features rather than the top 5 useful features. It's a little aggressive, and obviously this list can be debated. But when my colleagues and I were discussing what we should include, what we wanted this webinar to be, we based it on our experiences and tried to identify features that were useful to a wide set of Tableau users. I think if I had the option, if I had the option to change the title, I might call it Getting Your Creative Juices Flowing. Right? Because really what we want to do in this webinar is show you ways that Tableau is used sort of differently from out of the box, right? Based on functionality that's available, but some creativity in there. All right, and we also wanted to, as I said, make sure that it was available to a wide set of users. So the things that we're going to talk about as we go through the session are dynamic parameters, and that's actually one of the only things that I think is a piece of functionality within Tableau that you kind of use it the way it's designed to be used. But in terms of being useful, it's been a real lifesaver to some of the work that we've been doing. The other 4 features that we're going to talk about are what I refer to as generalist. There's a broad spectrum of ways that they can be used. And those topics are the core interface, which you can kind of see a peek of over here, the general workspace for Tableau. And I wanted to start there because we do have some people on the call with us that don't have any exposure to Tableau, just thinking about how to use it. So it'll be a good kickoff point. We'll talk about dashboards and stories. We'll go through a brief session on Polygon mapping, and then I want to wrap up with charts that are beyond Show Me, right? That Show Me list in the top right-hand corner. So this really isn't a how-to webinar. I'm going to keep things moving along so we can cover a lot of ground. So my intention is not to teach you how to do these specific things, but more to show you the kinds of things that can be done and to let you then go off and explore on your own and start, again, as I said, using your creative juices to see what you can accomplish with Tableau. So I think we need to start with a little bit of context for all of this. So the 3 points that I want to go over are my background, so you know where I'm coming from. I want to talk about the types of analytical questions that are asked about data and where Tableau fits into that list of questions. And then finally, I want to touch on the most important idea of this useful to whom, right? So when I say the top 5 useful features, what's the real audience that we're trying to direct this to? So I have 25 years of consulting and training experience. Most of that, if not all of that, is focused around data and working with data. So I'm not an application developer. I do a lot of data analysis. Back in the day, we used to call it data warehousing and enterprise reporting. Today, we refer to it as big data and analytics. That's the focus of my work. I've been working with the various products from Tableau for about 9 years at this point on a very regular basis. I have a couple of organizations that are very interested in credentials. Okay, sorry, I have a question here about has the session started? So I'm assuming that you can all hear me. If you cannot hear me, can somebody just send a question there? Okay. So back to credentials, I have a number of organizations that are interested in credentials. So mine are a master's in education and currently working on a doctorate in education that I might finish one of these days. both of those revolve around using technology and how we improve education through the use of technology. All right, so the types of analytical questions that are asked about data, and I wanted to include this to help focus the discussion. That people can try to use Tableau in a lot of different ways. We can probably make almost anything happen with Tableau with a lot of extra work. But the first kind of question is what we refer to as descriptive, right? I refer to that as the what we do mostly for reporting. What were our sales last week? How many patients entered the emergency room last week? How many students were we teaching in the classroom last week? It's also the descriptive statistics. What's the average age? What's the average sale price? Distributions of data. So just reporting on what we have out there. The second type of question is the one that I spend a lot of my time on, which is exploratory. I have a data set and I'm really trying to identify trends, correlations in that data that may not have been apparent to us before. Okay? And for both of those, the descriptive and the exploratory, I'm really not trying to make projections to a larger population. I'm really focusing on here's the data that we have, and here's what this data is saying to us about this data. Those two steps are the real strengths, especially the exploratory, the strengths of Tableau. Okay? And it's those two steps that usually lead us into these other kinds of questions. So the inferential is, how do I take a small sample and project to the larger population? How do I predict, use some variables to predict something in the future, a current election, stock price, those sorts of things. Causal is, does X cause Y? So I ran a promotion or I started selling products on an end cap in the supermarket. Did we see a sales increase? It's very general, very sort of average, did something change? And then finally, mechanistic, which is the hardest one to do and really only works now with some simple models. But that's the idea of, well, if I increase the dosage from 0.5 milligrams to 0.7 milligrams, then we know that we're going to see a heart rate decrease of 5 from 80 to 75. Okay? So very specific, if I change X, what's the impact on Y? Descriptive and exploratory are where Tableau really excels. You can sort of get to some of these other things. We have a little forecasting in Tableau. There are some analytics, but that descriptive and exploratory is where the strength is and where most people are using the product. So then in terms of useful to whom, the focus today is really on the beginner to advanced user, right? When we put this together, we were thinking about people that use Tableau as part of their job, but it's not their entire job. So you might be a store manager, you might be a department manager. I've had people that are radiologists in labs or swim coaches that have data sets that they want to look at. So they use it a couple of times a week. Right? This isn't intended for the super user. Super users out there probably know everything that I'm going to touch on. And those super users are people that they are sometimes the consultant within an organization, right? They're the person that you go to when you have a really challenging problem, when you have difficult data that's messy and you don't know how to get it all into Tableau in a nice, simple way. Those are the folks that we refer to as super users. So what we're trying to focus on is these features that are useful to that beginner advanced user. So I have a couple of Tableau workbooks that I'm going to slide onto the screen as we go through this and then move them off to show different things. So this will be a little bit of a show and tell as we walk through it. But the areas, as I said before, that I want to cover are just the core interface, dynamic parameters, dashboards and stories, polygon mapping, and charts beyond show me. So we included the core interface because we've found it an incredibly easy product to use. It doesn't really require, a long learning curve. We can probably get to 80%, in a class, we can probably get to 80% of what you needed to know for 80% of your work within a day or so. It is very, very flexible. And it's also very feature rich, which is part of the reason why we're not going to do a lot of how-to in here, because it just goes on and on. Right, so let me just jump over to Tableau. Again, for those of you that are new to Tableau, it's a workbook format, has lots of tabs on the bottom. These are the pieces of data that I can use to create visualizations in the center here. I'm cheating a little bit. You can see that I'm going to create a scatter plot to start with. It's defined in rows and columns, even though we might have scatter plots that they still kind of fall into rows and columns. And then in this workbook, what I've done is I've included 4 different unrelated data sets, just because I have different pieces that I want to use to show you different things. So orders is the information that comes with Tableau when you install it on your machine. World indicators also comes with Tableau as part of the package. I have some information here about hospitals, and I have some information here about diabetes from a study that was done. And in this case, there were a couple of million rows, and I just went out and grabbed rows 200,000 to 300,000 and brought those in to run some exercises with. So I'm going to start with the world indicators. And maybe my question is, I'm thinking of expanding, with a new product. What can I tell about countries? And I want to know if there's some relationship between the percentage of the population in the country that's between 0 and 14, and the percentage of the population that is over 65. And so I can start laying that out on here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell Tableau that I want to see every data point, and there we go. So for all the rows that we have, which is 2,484 of them, I've plotted the intersection between the percentage of population that's over 65 and the percentage of the population that is 0 to 14. And I can see that there's, I would say just by looking at this, that there's a strong correlation between the two. I can quickly add a trend line in here. So fairly steep. And if I look at some of the information that's provided by Tableau, I have the, our typical line of y equals mx plus b. I have that r squared value there, 0.72. To tell if a correlation is strong, I need just the r value. So I would get out my calculator and figure out what the r value is from the squared value. It comes out to 0.83. That's pretty close to 1. And the closer to 1 or a -1, the more correlation there is. So this data tells us that there's, tight correlation between the two pieces of information. All right, so I just got rid of my trend lines. I'd like to see, if I look at this by region, all right, so if I take up to the top of the data here, I've got countries, and there are way too many to show that in here, but I've got regions and I've got years. The data represents 2000 to 2012. So let me color code this. Let me take a look at the data by region. And now more information is starting to pop out, right? So I'm doing just some exploration of the data. So the red is Africa. So I see the red has a preponderance of high percentage 0 to 14 and a low over 65. And I would say, even though the green is kind of spread throughout, there's, it's really heavy down here. So a little bit leaning towards the over 65 and a little bit less on the percentage of population between 0 and 14. So just starting to formulate more questions that I might be asking, right? I'm going to take the color region off of the color, and not sure what I'm going to see, but let's try, what if I put year? So I'm going to color code by year. Not much that I can draw a conclusion from. Maybe there's a kind of a lot of blue up here that I might want to look at in a little bit more detail. But no, not really. So let's take that out. The other thing I can do is, well, maybe I'm only interested, I want to look at like a region at a time. Excuse me. So I want to add a filter to this. Okay? And I want to look at Africa first, because that was really red up in the top left. And to make life a little bit easier, I want to be able to change the filters. And since I only want to pick one at a time, I'm just going to change the way this list looks. All right, so now I have radio buttons, so I can flip back and forth. So there's Africa, here's Asia. And now it might make a little bit more sense to break this down by countries within Asia. So let me take within Asia. So let me take country and drop that on the color. Oh, it looks like there might be a lot of them. Okay, that's quite a long list actually, but we can see some groupings of color in here, right? It's not evenly spread throughout. Well, what if I changed to the Americas? What does that look like? Okay, so some differences in here, and we'll just take one more. We'll take a look at, I think Oceania looked a little bit different. Oh, still the same. Okay, so same kind of structure, that little sort of swooping curve, kind of a crescent moon kind of a curve. But I can go in and I can do this sort of exploration of the data. Okay. So great interface, just drag and drop, really good for slice and dice. If I wanted to do something different, I can create a line chart. So for line chart, I'm going to use my diabetes data, and we have these encounter dates. Every time there was an encounter with the patient, came into the emergency room, came into the clinic, we click encounter. So I want to look at this, and I want to look at this by month within the year. So those are my months within the years, all consecutive. And what I'm interested in here is, let me just move my data a little bit. Okay. The number of lab procedures. Oh, actually, why don't we just do the number of encounters? Okay, so that's the number of encounters we've had over time. This is just crazy data on my part, ignore that. Right? So we've had these encounters over time. And again, one of the things that we see is in each December, there's this little spike. Right? So, question of, well, why would that spike have occurred? And why would that spike have occurred? All right, I have to go, I was asked to go full screen, but I have to go a little bit smaller so I can see. Just slide this over left. Sorry, what was that spike? So we did a little bit of research and found out that at the end of the year, there were a number of hospital closings. So people were going into clinics more, just some changes in the demographics. So we see these spikes that are occurring at the end of the year. And we can do things like ask questions about, well, if I break this down, right? So this is one line with all the encounters. Does it look different if for people that do have diabetes versus people that don't have diabetes? So I can take my diabetes and drop it onto the color, and I can see these spikes are a little bit smaller for people with diabetes than people that don't have diabetes. And again, as we researched that a little bit more, we found out that it was an awareness factor that allowed this increase to be a little bit smaller than the bigger increase. So one way to look at it, we can look at it by age group is always interesting, right? Similar patterns for all of the age groups as we go along. And these things can also turn into, just reporting, right? I can go through and I can create a number of tabs within my workspace and use those to report out to other groups. Right. So I just wanted to give you a sense of what that workspace was, what the visualizations are, and how we go about building those visualizations. So then the next piece, and as I said before, this is a little less use your creativity, though you can get creative with them, a little bit more of straight on functionality. And Tableau has always had this functionality called parameters, right? And a parameter is just a value that we want to pass in to some kind of an equation. So maybe I have a calculation that I built within Tableau and I have to change the interest rate, right? And so I can have a drop-down list or a text box on the side where I just type in the interest rate. Or I want to do a test. So in this case, if the date equals the date that I'm passing in, then go do X. So in the past, these parameters were fixed. There was work that I had to do in order to keep my list of, in this case, dates up to date. So in this visualization, let me make it a little bigger for you. In this visualization, it's pretty straightforward, right? Another line chart. And for each day from January 1st, right, we plotted the number of encounters. And let me just show you the actual data. So that diabetes data that we were looking at, I forgot, I think it averaged like 2,000 encounters per month. So it comes out to around 70 per day. So I just created some data to say, okay, here are the encounters that we had from January 11th through January 12th, and just plotted those if you just looked at the line. The next thing that we did was we added this reference line. This could be a reference line, you can have a reference line that references anything that you want. In this case, what we were doing is we created a parameter, right? So a way to enter a value. And these are my values over here. So I can pick a date. And in this case, when I pick a date, what it does is it moves that reference line to the value of the encounters on that date. So 68. I don't know if this is really meaningful, but it's a good way to just show, right? I can have a parameter and I can enter it. Okay, now let's go edit the parameter. Okay, so it's fixed. I've got this list here. And if I wanted to add something in the past, if I wanted to add something, I can actually go add it in by typing it in, or I can run a process and do a little bit of a refresh. The dynamic parameters, relatively new, is the second option here. And what it's going to do is when the workbook opens, right, it will go and automatically refresh. So when workbook opens, date, I wanted to go look at the dates that are available and add to this list. Okay. All right. So you know how it is when you're doing a demo. Sometimes things work. I've been going fast, but I've been trying to check. All right. And I will come back to some of the questions in 1 second. All right. So I changed it to when workbook opens. I wanted to go look at the dates. I'm going to say, okay. I'm going to save. I'm actually going to close that. Let's put the 13th in here, and we'll call that 80. I will save that. And really, what I'm interested here wrong one. There we go. All right. So now what I'm hoping is when I use this drop-down list, I see the 13th in there. All right. So there's the 13th, right? And that was 80. That got onto the useful feature list just because it makes life much easier. Okay. All right. So let me just look at the question. So one of the questions is how can the detail and the size marks be used? I'm going to come back to some of those in another example I have in a few minutes. So if we can just hold off on those. And then what version? This is version 2020.4, so it's the most current version. Dynamic parameters, I think in 2020.1 is when they were added, but I don't quote me on that. We can go back and kind of dig that up. Okay, so the continuous line here, I did a couple of things. So I added a calculation. We can do calculations in Tableau, right? And we'll just take a look at this calculated field. And it looks a little complicated, but it's just basically saying, you know, go look for the date that's been entered, and then based on that date, find the value for the number of encounters. Okay, so that is a slightly more complicated calculation that we can add. And then the line itself is, well, let me go here, is just a reference line, right? So I can add a new reference line. In this case, this reference line, okay, we said the value that we want to be used to set is the encounters on the date, and then the label, this little text here, is just some, you know, syntax that we use to say take the field name equal to whatever the value is that we're looking for on that field. So that line is just referred to as a reference line. Okay, so dynamic parameters. Now the question about the size mark and what was I going to show you with that? All right, let me go back and quickly, just in case I took that out. I'm going to do another really quick scatter plot. I'll use the same data. So 14, 65. Okay. Not in our list of things to talk about. And I would say 99% of the time I would consider it a useful feature. One of the things that Tableau does for us automatically is aggregate information, right? So in this case, I just asked for the population 65 and over and the population between 0 and 14. And since these are percentages, it probably didn't do the right thing, but it just adds them all up for us. So most of the time, if I said, you know, what were sales on Sunday, I don't want to see every individual sales record from the point of sale system. I just want to know the total sales on Sunday. And so because I only asked for Sunday and sales, Tableau automatically aggregates for us. That's why we only see 1 point here. All right. So one of the things, oh, actually, got a better example for you. Okay. Covered charges, total payments, right? Covered charges and total payments. Same thing. We automatically summarize those. So what if I wanted to see this information by, there are a lot of procedures. So let's do it by group. So now I took that one bullet point, one dot. I want you to be able to see the, oh, I can't see the legend, so I just have to move over. So these are the different groups that we have: orthopedic, respiratory, vascular, and we've broken those down, right, to say, okay, they, for neurological, this is the total payments and the total covered charges. Now, if I was looking at this, here's neurological and here's cardiac. My guess is going to be that cardiac isn't a lot bigger because they charge more, right? I'm going to guess that it's bigger because they just do more. And I don't think I have, like a total count in here for patients seen. But what we could do is we could say, all right, well, how does this translate into full-time equivalents? And so I could take my data item called full-time equivalents and say, if there are more full-time equivalents, make those circles bigger, and they look to be generally increasing. This one, I don't know how it compares to the 338 and 247. All right, so that's one way to use size. I probably use size more when I'm doing scatter plots. I mean, I haven't used it when I was doing a line, but you could make your lines thicker and thinner based on values. You could make your bar charts bigger and smaller, right, wider, based on the values. Okay. I want to just see that other question. All right. Detail, right, is a way of well, that's already in the detail, but detail is a way of having information show up under the tooltips. So as I was hovering over here, right, that detail is going to show us more information. And that tooltip, I frequently go in, and change some of the text on them, right, just to make those things a little bit clearer. That didn't make it clearer, but I usually do that. Okay. All right. So we talked about the general interface, the size, the color. They are really, really great. Oh, shape. All right, I might as well do that since we're here. Let's do something crazy. All right. Oh, hospital region. That's not so bad. We have a bunch of hospital regions. I've already used size to show full-time equivalents. So I'm going to use shape, right? A different shape to represent each of these referral regions for the hospitals. Again, the rules or the guidelines for creating effective visualizations would say, oh, that's way too many. I'm going to spend more time looking at the legend than I am looking at the data. But that's how it works with shape. It'll break it down by those different shapes. Okay, so next up in our list, dynamic parameters, okay, dashboards and stories. We've created a bunch of individual visualizations. We've created a bunch of visualizations, and dashboards are used. Just about every company I've ever gone into to work with them, they use dashboards. Right, that quick at-a-glance view. Executive walks in on Monday morning, wants to know what the last week's work was like. We can take a whole bunch of visualizations and stick them onto a single dashboard. The nice thing about that is that there are these actions that we can add that help keep things in sync, and we can add interactivity. Okay. The second part of that, and this is the one that we'll do a dashboard and then we'll go on to stories. Stories, I think, are an underutilized feature of Tableau. What I love about the stories is with the dashboard, I'm kind of just saying, here's stuff, go figure it out. And that, for the most part, that's going to work. That'll be okay. But if I if I've been doing some analysis and I want to bring somebody along and say, well, we looked at X, we looked at Y, we looked at Z, and then here's what we found, and I want to take them through those steps, a story is a great way to do that. So I'm going to build a little story for you when we get there. All right, so let's go look. Let's do a dashboard. Okay, so I've already got a tab down here called Sales Dashboard. And dashboards, there's a different icon for them down in the bottom right-hand corner. But when we get here, you'll see that all of the sheets that I have, that the visualizations that I've created, one visualization per sheet, excuse me, are all in my list. So what I want to do is I want to take a couple of these. I'm going to pop back for a second, right? So I did category sales. What are sales like for our categories? And I've got region sales, and I've got the regions as bars, but within the bars, I've broken it down by category. And I did the same thing with our customer segments, right? What does each segment buy in terms of our 3 categories? And then I did sales by month. All right, so I'll build a very simple dashboard. I'm going to take category sales, bring that over. I'll take region sales and bring that over. Customer segment sales, and then sales by month. By the way, this is one of the main reasons why I label my tabs, so that when I'm looking at them later on, it's a little bit easier to figure out what's going on. I do end up with things called 16, 17, 18. I forgot what it says when we just create a new one. Okay, a couple of little quick fixes in here. I don't want scroll bars, so I'm just going to make this, just adjust the sizing for these two. Okay, so just adjusted that size so that we can see everything. All right, now, not bad, right? And with dashboards, one of the things we can do if you have other Tableau tools, the one called Tableau Server, is you can go through this process of publishing, and then people that do not have Tableau can access it via the web, and it would look, something like this. Okay? I'm going to come back to this in a second, but through their browser. Okay, now what I want to do is I want to add a little bit of focus to this. And I'm going to add an action. And the action that I'm going to add is when I hover over one of these bars, it will highlight the corresponding information in the other charts. There are many different kinds of actions we can take. So let's go to dashboard, actions. I'm going to add an action, right? I'm going to add a highlight. I can add a filter action to this. I can, have it go to another URL, change parameters. So we got six different actions here. I'm just going to stick with highlight for now. And what I'm saying here is the driver, the source of the action is going to be my category sales sheet. And when I hover over something up there, I want a dynamic change to affect customer, region, and sales by month. I'll just do OK. And OK again. All right. I love this stuff. Here we go. So if I look at furniture, it focuses in on furniture in the other places. And if I go to technology, it focuses my attention on technology in the other places. This is extremely useful, but it is also extremely common, right? This is the kind of stuff that people are doing with dashboards. We can add, I think I might have to fix this if we did it, but if I went back to category sales and I said, I want to put a filter on date, and I just want to be able to pick 1 year at a time. Okay. So 2018. So I've got my dates up there. The really cool thing is if I also wanted to keep all of those in sync in the dashboard, I can take this filter and then say, hey, apply it to some other worksheets, right? In this case, I'm going to apply it to just 3 other worksheets. I want it to apply to region, customer, and sales. Okay. So now if I go look at those, right, that filter is there, but it's only showing me 2018 data. Okay. I change this to, so what is it, 1200K, 2014, okay, down to not much there. Let's see what happened to region. Yeah, only 1 product, right? So back in 2014, we were only selling 1 product. Okay? And I can do show filter and see. So this is another way of like keeping everything in sync when we get over to the dashboard. Okay. I need to add that filter in here. All right, now, very common, right? There's another icon, the very last one, called News Story. And again, that news story is essentially taking people from page to page to page. So we'll leave the captions here. I'm going to make up a silly story, right? It doesn't have a lot of value here. Okay, so I'm going to use, for my first page, the category sales. Let's go back and do all. Okay, so I can add a caption here and say category sales have remained stable. Just a little message. One of the things about dashboards that's different from dashboards and stories that's different from the visualization is in a visualization, I can't just go add like a text block like I do in PowerPoint. But in the story and in the dashboard, I can drag this up to add some text. And this is a great story. So I can add a whole description if I want to add more information here. So then I'm just going to add another, and another. So this story is going to have 3 pages. On the second one, we'll show region sales. On the third one, we'll show customer segment sales. And you can imagine putting some text in here. And on the last one, whoops, a little too quick there. On the last one, we will do sales by month. And so again, if I publish this and then have people access it through a browser, right, they can just click through the story, and I can be very specific about what I want them to be thinking about on each page. So I think there's a whole world of opportunity here that organizations just aren't taking advantage of yet. Okay, one last thing to think about in terms of stories, and that is as a substitute for PowerPoint, or to make it a little more interactive. So where is that scatter plot back there? Okay. All right. So what I did was the slide deck that we were looking at the beginning, I took the cover and I just made an image out of it. Okay, I'm going to change my layout here. I'm going to do numbers instead of text boxes there. Okay, so I took the image and just put it into my story. Okay. And I'm going to add another page, and I'll add the agenda in there. And then I'll add another page. And the really cool thing about stories is I don't have to add this individual visualization. I can add an entire dashboard that's already in place. So I can add this dashboard in, and then I can add another story that's the scatter plot. And the beautiful thing about this is if it was a presentation that I was actually doing, go back to 1. Right? I could walk through this just like I'm walking through that PowerPoint deck, start talking about the things that I wanted to talk about, use the highlighting capabilities in here, and then even use the filtering capabilities in here. I don't know about you, but I, if I was trying to do this with PowerPoint and I ran over to get my Excel spreadsheet and tried to do a quick calculation on the fly while I'm talking to you, that's never going to work, right? I can never add 2 and 2 and get the right answer. But if I can build that into this kind of interactivity, that's a great way to present some information. Okay, so I think I answered the last question here, which is you can create a dashboard with some pages of dashboard and another page storing the same product. I haven't tried going that way. So I think the question was, if I create a dashboard, can I take, no. So when I create a dashboard, it's just giving me the sheets that are available. And the story allows me to take a dashboard and just to replace. So either the story is going to be either one dashboard or one visualization on each page. Okay. All right. Something I want to just flip through with you. And the next thing is I'm just trying to pay attention to the time here. Is polygon mapping. Right. So let me just move this one away. Okay. So polygon mapping is, well, the idea is we make polygons, we make shapes, and there are tools online that you can do this. You can use graph paper and trace something out, but essentially, I'm identifying data points. So this is an apartment building in Chicago, and floors 1 through 30, the corner of the building, they're all laid out like this. And the management of the building was keeping track of injuries that occurred in this particular floor plan. So I guess for 30 floors, this number of injuries isn't so bad. So what we can do is, all right, if I want to map this to this is like just an image, right? It's a non-standard map. I can create polygons for each room. So I just create a shape file for each room. And I just, tell it the X and Y coordinates and go to the next point and the next point and the next point and keep working my way around until I come back to the first point. And now I have a polygon that represents the master bedroom in this case. And what I end up with is a table, shape file, if you're familiar with GIS, right? So here's shape 0, and these are all of its coordinates. Here's shape number 1, and these are its coordinates, and the 0 through 4 and the 0 through 6 are the way I walk through the process. So what I brought into Tableau was this shape file, that injuries file, and then I added another table, because if I go back, I somehow had to take my shape file and tell it that shape 0 was, I called it first bedroom, right? And shape 2 was first bathroom. So I had to have a way of linking them up. Okay, so I linked them up, and where is my polygon? It's here somewhere, hang on. Polygon, polygon, polygon. There we go. Okay, All right, so I've already brought my data in. I'm going to add my X and Y axis, and I call them X and Y because it's easy for me to remember to put the X on the columns and the Y's on the rows. And so now I've got my template. You can kind of see my little image hiding out down there. I skipped a step. I've already added the image to the worksheet. And I want to change, well, this usually comes up as automatic, but I want to change the type of mark. I want to tell it that I'm using polygons in here. Okay? And then I'm going to take those points. Remember, the points went from 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and it was the sequence. So I'm going to put the points on the path to tell, not quite there yet, but to follow this path for the shapefile. Go 0.1, 0.0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. I'll do that, and then I'm going to take my shape ID and drag it to the details. So now it took my shapefile. So here are my shape IDs, my point IDs, my X and my Y coordinates. And it took that information and just plotted them out on top of my map. Now, you can be very, very specific and much cleaner and neater than I was here. I actually was doing this a little rough on purpose when I did it. And then the next thing I want to do is, where are my injuries? Here is the number of injuries. I'm just going to add that to the color mark. And it's using a gradient from 0 to 12. And just because injuries is supposed to be bad, I'm just going to make it a red. Okay, and so we can see this is, I should add some, there we go. I added the room to the detail. So now in my tooltip, I can see that this is the kitchen. I couldn't remember that it was the kitchen. All right, so that's polygon mapping. There's a question about how many OLAP queues you can use for a data source in a single Tableau workbook. Jill, I don't know off the top of my head if there's a technical limit. I haven't run into that limit yet. I would say I've had maybe at the max 7 or 8 in there, but they're all independent, right? There are other times when I bring in data sources that I want to do what Tableau refers to as data blending. And so that's a little bit different. That might get a little bit more complicated, right? So I don't know off the top of my head if there's a kind of a technical limit. I haven't seen anybody talking about it on any of the forums or anything like that. Okay, so we can do anything. I don't want to say we can do anything with this, but we can do a lot. So this was another exercise I went through, just using, during a ball game, where were the outs occurring. That looks like it comes out to more than 27, so I must have had several games worth of data. I've had people that have taken sort of images of the human body and have done really nice polygon maps to map, as people come into the emergency room, where the injuries are, wrist, elbow, forearm, bicep, that kind of information. You can do the type of injury. So you can do pretty much anything that, as long as you have an image and you can draw the polygons. And like I said, if you just Google polygon mapping tools, there are several free tools online. Remember, free does not always mean it's like easy to use, but there are some free ones out there. Okay, all right, so we have 5 minutes left. The last thing I wanted to show you is the stuff that I'm actually most excited about. And it is this ability to, remember back here, we've got show me, right? So I can take data that I have and put it into 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So 24 different kind of built-in views of data. And those will get me a very, very long way. But what I really like is my good workbook, okay? What I really like is the ability to do some additional charts. So here, let me just go in here and show you it's a little bit better, okay? So a control chart. And in this control chart, these are the number of encounters by day. We have a filter in here with a slider that allows me to, change the number of the range of data that we're looking at. And then we built some calculations. So where is my lower control limit? Again, this was just a calculation to say, take the data that's in the window, not necessarily in the data set behind this, but what am I displaying? And based on what's being displayed, calculate the standard deviations. Okay? And so the lower control limit and the upper control limit are based on standard deviation. And then we put a parameter in to say, well, what does it look like if I look at just one standard deviation? And what does it look like if I want to use 3 standard deviations? Okay. So again, just a way in this case to think about, if you're talking about an emergency room, right? Well, really, where are our upper, and I don't think there are any lower limits, but where are our upper limits in the control room, and we can build that into a chart. Not a standard chart, but certainly just kind of like a line chart and some additional lines that that we're putting in. So we can do control charts, Pareto chart. Now, Pareto chart, this is really just 2 bar charts, right? I've got my bar chart of whatever I was measuring here, number of encounters. Number of encounters, I forgot what the, by day or something. And then this other blue is just a bar chart that's a running total. So, right, as we went from bar to bar to bar, we just added up the totals until things sort of leveled out. But instead of showing it as a bar, we're just showing it as a circle, a dot somewhere along the line. So this was not very complicated to create. And then we just added a few reference lines, and I added, I said before, you can't do text in a visualization, but what you can do is annotate. So I can put in a little annotation of some. So, oops, sorry about that. Yikes, hang on. There we go. Okay, so control chart, waterfall chart. This is a scatter plot. This isn't so much, going beyond the show me stuff, but it's similar to what we did with that reference line before. But in this case, we're using the reference line, and we can change the percentage that we're interested in. And as we change that, anything to the left of it turns blue, and everything to the right of it stays orange. Just again, a way to highlight things a little bit more. Okay, but the one I want to do with you, sheet 16, not that one. Let's add a new sheet in here. Okay, I'm going to use sales data for this, and we'll wrap this up. I know you have to go. So this is pretty quick again. So I'm going to use sales data to create a waterfall chart. Looks like that. Right? And these are becoming very, very popular. So let's see. I want to show this by month. Okay, and I'm going to do profit. And I want to have this as a Gantt. Sorry, hang on a second. Order date, profit. Okay, I'm going to change this to a Gantt. Okay. And with the Gantt, it's just giving me these the starting points for everything. And let me just do region equals south. Okay. All right. So then what I did was I just created a new calculated field because now I want these bars to have some depth to them. Right. So somebody asked before about using size. Right. So I created a field called negative profit, which is just profit times -1. And I can drag that to the size mark. And now I have depth to my bars. And I'm going to change this to a running total. Okay, so that's really one. There's my waterfall chart. Okay, so I can take a value. I have running totals, so I know, sort of the build process. The depth of the line is the change in profit for that given month. And then we can add profit to color. Again, I'll just make it red, green, diverging. Okay. I did it backwards. Sorry, I did it backwards. My reds are growth and my greens are decreases. But that's a waterfall chart. So again, using the built-in capabilities of Tableau, you can take this further. All right, I took you over a couple of minutes. I truly didn't expect to take you over, so I apologize for that. But just the point of the webinar was to think about how you can use Tableau to try to convey or understand the information that you have and then convey it in ways that aren't necessarily sort of built into the base product, with the exception of that dynamic parameters, which is really good. All right, everybody, I think I've answered all these questions as we've gone along. So thank you very much. I know that you can pull down the PowerPoint deck and there are some links in there to web-based solutions if you have questions, courses, things like that. So thank you all for attending and have a great weekend.